The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is not a new country. It is a country that was first established in 1744 under the same leadership as exists today and under the same principles over the same territory. In 1818, the state was destroyed, and 20 years later it re-emerged again under the same leadership and under the same principles over the same territory. It was again invaded and destroyed, and it was able to reconstitute itself beginning in 1902 and completing the process in 1932, again under the same leadership over the same territory. I mention this because it is very, very rare, if not impossible, in the history of nations that a nation will be destroyed and is able to reconstitute itself under the same leadership over the same territory unless it has a large sense of legitimacy and deep, deep roots in its society. And this is the case of Saudi Arabia. This is where we derive our strength from as a nation. Saudi Arabia's policies have always been to look inwards, to try to build a nation and develop a country, improve the standard of living of our people. We have no ambitions beyond our border. We seek no territory. We have enough land, enough people, enough resources. What we seek is an environment in which we can live in peace and security, develop our country, as I said, improve the quality of life for our people. Saudi Arabia in today's world is a critical country. It is the birthplace of the Islamic faith. It is the home of the two holy mosques. 1.6 billion Muslims face in the direction of Mecca 5 times a day. So this puts a lot of responsibility on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia towards the Islamic world. Saudi Arabia is also a country that has 25% of the world's oil, which means that it has tremendous responsibilities with regards to the world energy markets and the global economic system. Saudi Arabia is a country that has one of the largest financial reserves, which again places upon it a tremendous responsibility towards the international financial markets. Saudi Arabia's geographic location is at the intersection of 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa. 3 of the world's most important waterways run by Saudi Arabia, the Strait of Hormuz, Bab al-Mandab, and the Suez Canal. 10% of the world's trade runs through the Red Sea. And so in that sense, Saudi Arabia is a pivotal country. And it's a country that takes its responsibilities very seriously. Our foreign policy is based on proportion and balance. It's based on pragmatism and practicality. It's non-ideological. And so this is how we approach the problems in our region. We are looking today at a region that is going through tremendous crises. We have the stalemate politically in Lebanon. We have the war in Syria. We have the crisis in Iraq. We have Yemen. We have Libya. We have Iran pursuing aggressive policies. We have sectarianism. We have the issue of terrorism and extremism. These are all tremendous complications that the region are going through that require a steady hand and that require firmness as well as wisdom in dealing with them. And it requires cooperation between like-minded countries if we want to overcome these the various challenges that we seek. We're also in the midst of this crisis, focusing inward on Saudi Arabia to try to move our country to a better place. And this is where our Vision 2030 comes into play. We are embarking on a plan of economic reform that seeks to transform our country. We want to unleash the power of innovation. We want to unleash the power of our youth. 70% of our country is under the age of 30. 50% of our citizens are connected through social media, which is one of the highest percentages in the world. We want to get out of the way and let our young people innovate, produce, create, and in the process generate more prosperity and stability for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We're looking to diversify our income from oil by attracting investments, both domestic and foreign. We're looking to open up new industries such as mining, tourism, recreation. We're looking to establish partnerships with countries that are not just transactional, where you buy something and you sell something, but that are true partnerships where we work together, invest together, and reap the harvest of our investments together. And this is the type of partnership that we are working on developing with your great nation, Turkey. When we look at the Saudi-Turkish relations, Saudi Arabia and Turkey have been allies and partners for many decades. We have both been in the anti-communist camp when it was not fashionable to be so in the Middle East. We work together on pushing back against the encroachment by the Soviet Union into the Middle East region. Today we're working very closely with regard to Syria and supporting the moderate opposition in Syria. We're working very closely towards pushing back against sectarianism and sectarian policies. We work very closely together in the Organization of Islamic Countries to promote moderation and to push back against extremism. We have very strong economic ties, we have very strong investment ties, we have very strong people-to-people ties, and the decision by the leadership of both countries has been to take these very strong and historic ties and elevate them to a strategic level. And this is why the decision was made and the agreement was signed to establish a strategic consultation and coordinating committee that would be high level, that would have working groups underneath it that deal with security, military, political, economics and trade, finance and investment, cultural issues, so that we can institutionalize the relationship between our two great countries and set the stage for even stronger cooperation in the decades ahead. So this is, in a sense, Saudi Arabia, our internal policies, our external policies, and the situation we see in the region. I would be happy to go through each of the problems of the region before I take your questions, if you would like me to do this, or I can stop here and take questions. Okay, I will, in terms of the problems that we see in the region, the big challenge that we see is the war in Syria. We see a situation where a man has been responsible for the murder of 600,000 people, the displacement of 12 million people, the destruction of a great nation. And this man, we believe strongly, has no future in Syria and must go. And this is also the Turkish position. We have been working with a number of countries to support the moderate Syrian opposition. And at the same time, we have been working in order to put in place a political process through which a political transition can take place. And this is reflected in the Geneva I Declaration and in UN Security create vacuums, and in those vacuums flow extremists and terrorists, and it becomes very difficult to try to restore order and stability. And so we believe, along with Turkey and the international community, that we must support the Libyan government, and we must help them build up their security forces so they can establish stability in the country and move on. Otherwise, we see the danger of Daesh moving into Libya, and from Libya into the Sahel countries of West Africa, which would be a very difficult situation for everybody. When it comes to terrorism, before I go to terrorism, I will talk about, let me talk to terrorism and then I talk about Iran. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is committed to fighting what we call the men, the money, and the mindset. Fighting the men is the easiest part. You train and equip your forces and you go after the terrorists. And we have done so very effectively. Fighting the money is more complicated. It requires working through your banking system. It requires dealing with cash couriers. It requires dealing with financial regulations. We have put those in place now, and we have very, very strict procedures that minimize the ability of terrorists or extremists to receive money. We have put tremendous restrictions on our charities. They cannot transfer money abroad. They cannot withdraw cash from their bank accounts, and all their activities are restricted internally to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The mindset is the most complicated part, because that is a generational issue. And here we have employed a whole of government approach, where we look at education, we look at the mosques, we look at social media, we look at our information policy, and we try to mobilize the country in order to come up with counter messages that will drown out the messages that are coming from the extremists and from the terrorists, and to encourage people to reject such messages. We also have counseling programs for our young, and we also have rehabilitation programs for those who have been led astray, in order to rehabilitate them and bring them back to society where they can lead normal lives. The big challenge that we see in the Middle East is the perverse influence of Iran. Since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iran has declared itself a Shia state. Its constitution calls for the export of its revolution. And Iran does not believe in citizenship. It believes that every Shia belongs to Iran and not to their countries. And that is not acceptable. The sectarian policies that Iran has pursued have been very divisive and very dangerous to the region, whether in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, whether in the Gulf, or whether in Yemen. And we believe that this, combined with Iran's support for terrorism, the establishment of Hezbollah, its interference in the affairs of other countries, its smuggling of explosives into Kuwait and Bahrain and Yemen and Saudi Arabia, its attempts to try to infiltrate countries throughout the Islamic world are rejected. And we believe that they have been a source for instability, not stability. And we hope that Iran will be able to change its policies and adopt realistic and lawful approaches to how it deals with countries. It is not acceptable for a country to assassinate diplomats, and Iran has. It is not acceptable for a country to attack embassies, and Iran has done so more than any other country in the world. It is not acceptable for a country to plant spy cells in another country with the objective of sabotage. Iran has done that. We have Iranians in our jail for doing so. So have a number of other countries. It is not acceptable for a country to harbor the leadership of Al-Qaeda since the fall of 2001. Iran has done so. Saad bin Laden, Osama bin Laden's son, is in Iran and has been for 16 years. Saif al-Adel, the chief of operations for Al-Qaeda, has been in Iran since 2001. Iran has sheltered and abetted them, and Iran has allowed them to operate out of its territory. The order to blow up 3 housing compounds in Riyadh in 2003 was made by Saif al-Adel from Iran. And we have the conversation on tape. The Iranians, according to the documents that were uncovered from Osama bin Laden's home in Abbottabad have had extensive links with Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden is telling his lieutenants that they have to coordinate with the Iranians, that they have to see what the Iranians think, that they should go through Iran. And this is not something that we made up. This is something that is in Osama bin Laden's documents that were captured by the US when they killed Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. We have knowledge of Iranian contacts, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, with Osama bin Laden in the 1990s when he was in Sudan, and with Imad Mughniya, who was the head of operations at the time for Hezbollah. We didn't make this up. This is a fact. We have evidence of Iran's involvement in the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia. We have the bomb maker who's from Hezbollah. The explosives came from the Bekaa Valley. The person managing the operation was the Iranian military attaché in Bahrain, a General Sharifi. The three leaders of the cell fled and went to Iran and have been living there since. The head of the operation was captured last year in Lebanon with an Iranian passport, even though he's a Saudi citizen. So the evidence of Iran harboring and abetting and supporting terrorist organizations is overwhelming. And Iran cannot expect to be a country that has normal relations with other countries unless it acts like a normal country. And we always say that Iran has to decide, is it a revolution or is it a nation state? If it's a revolution that is based on exporting itself and that is based on emotions and sectarianism, it will be impossible to deal with Iran. If it's a nation state, then it should act like a nation state, respect the principle of good neighborliness, respect the principle of non-interference in the affairs of others, and respect international laws. We have great respect for Iran as a country and for Persian civilization. We are very cognizant of the fact that Iran is a neighboring country and has been for thousands of years. And we would like to have the best relations we can with Iran. We would like to be able to trade with Iran. We would like to be able to cooperate with Iran. We would like to be able to remove any problems in the region so that we can calm down the tensions in our region and focus on what is most important to us, which is our domestic development, improving the quality of life for our people, making our country more dynamic, more efficient, more innovative, more prosperous. That's what we want. And we hope that Iran will be able to change its policies so that this can happen. But unless it does so, I'm afraid it will be virtually impossible to be able to reach an accommodation with the Iranians. It has been a one-way street. Since 1979, we extend our hand to the Iranians, and what we get in return is death and destruction. Anyway, I think our partnership with Turkey in the region is a critically important one. We are the two largest countries in the region, and we are Turkey to the north, Saudi Arabia in the middle. We face the same challenges: Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Iran's activities in the region, Yemen. We have the same outlook, which is we would like a secure, peaceful region that is calm, where there is no sectarianism, and where there are no wars, so that we can do what we both want to do, which is focus on our internal development and increase the prosperity and security of our people. And so the basis for a strategic relationship exists. The will to move towards a strategic relationship is there, and now we have put in place the means to do so. So I expect, God willing, that in the years ahead, the relationship between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the great nation of Turkey will be elevated to a much, much higher level. I expect it to broaden, deepen, and strengthen. And so on that hopefully positive note, I would like to stop and take your questions. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your speech. You gave us a very good framework of the bilateral and regional relations. You know, we have many questions from the audience, from our guests. We should start with the July 15 coup attempt. I know you have personally visited Turkish Grand National Assembly, and will you tell us what is your impression and what is the view of Saudi Arabia for this coup attempt?
We, like the rest of the world, we were stunned. Like the rest of the world, we were stunned by what happened on the 15th of July. We see a legitimate government, a democratic government, and we see an illegal attempt to try to bring about change by force. What we saw was heroism on the part of the Turkish people. The people of Turkey said, no, we have enough of military coups, we have a legitimate government, we have a democratic government, we have rule of law, and we intend to keep it this way. To see children, women, the elderly, students, to see conservatives and liberals go to the streets and confront tanks and say no, was truly inspiring. I think the Turkish people have earned the respect of the world. I think Turkey should be proud of its citizens for doing so. And it's also a tribute and a testament to the government institutions and that Turkey has built, and the legitimacy that the Turkish people have accorded those. I went and saw the parliament, and I was shown the areas where the missiles hit, and it was very stunning to see that a small group of people wants to impose itself on the will of the vast majority of the Turkish people by force. It was very moving to see the opposition groups immediately line up behind the government, and it was very inspiring to see the members of parliament open the parliament in the midst of this crisis in order to prove to the Turkish people that we are there and we are your representatives, and in order to send a message to the coup plotters that what you're trying to do is not acceptable. And when their building was bombed, I was told they went into the basement and continued to keep the parliament in session until the very end. So I think the Turkish people deserve a lot of respect. I think you should be proud of what you did as a nation and as people. And I believe that the steps that Turkey has taken on the 15th of July and that Turkey is taking today are steps that we support and that we believe the rest of the world should support.
Yeah, all Turkish people believe that there was FETÖ, Gülen movement behind this coup attempt. What do you think about the cooperation between Turkey and Saudi Arabia in eliminating these Gülen movement networks in the Gulf, or if there is in Saudi Arabia? What's your...
We have very extensive cooperation with Turkey when it comes to counterterrorism and law enforcement, and we have an extensive exchange of information between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and we are always open to more cooperation in any area that adds to the security of our respective people.
Well, we have some hot critical issues regarding foreign policy. You know, Turkey is conducting Ukraine's Desert Shield operation in Syria. What is the Saudi Arabian approach to that operation?
We support what Turkey is doing. We work closely with Turkey, as I mentioned in my talk, on supporting the moderate Syrian opposition. We were one of the first countries in the world to call for an international coalition to fight Daesh in Syria, and we hosted the first meeting in Jeddah of the core group of countries to launch such operations. Our Air Force was one of the first air forces to fly military missions against Daesh in Syria, We continue to do so. We expanded those operations to where we have aircraft now at Incirlink Air Base in Turkey, from which we also fly operations. So I believe that the objective that Turkey and Saudi Arabia have are the same. We want to defeat Daesh. And we also want to support the moderate opposition in Syria, and we want to bring about change in Syria.
Yeah, Turkish media is also debating the extent of the operation, whether it goes to Raqqa or Mosul with of course, U.S. cooperation. What is the Saudi perspective on that? If there is such a development, does Saudi Arabia contribute, or how do you evaluate?
We have said a year ago that we are prepared to send special forces into Syria as part of an American-led coalition in order to fight Daesh in Syria. This is still our approach. We have put together an Islamic alliance, military alliance that now includes 40 countries. Turkey was one of the founding members of this alliance, and the Islamic military alliance has indicated that it too is prepared to send ground troops into Syria should the international coalition led by the US make this request. So we are for anything that leads to the elimination of Daesh in Syria or terrorism anywhere else.
Well, Turkey now is considering how to improve, of course, the regional developments. And at the same time, Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım is talking sometimes in media about changing policy of Syria. What do you understand from this discussion, and what's your view?
I think that the changes have been overblown. We don't detect a change in the position of Turkey. Turkey has been very clear with us. The Turkish position in Syria is support for the moderate opposition, and that continues. The Turkish position in Syria is to fight Daesh, and that continues. The Turkish position is that a political solution in Syria must be based on the Geneva I Declaration and Security Council Resolution 2254, and that is also our position. The Turkish position is that the International Syrian Support Group, of which Turkey and Saudi Arabia are founding members, that the conclusions that this group has come to, which led to UN Security Council Resolution 2254, is the basis for any political settlement. This settlement requires establishing an interim governing council, the handover of power from Bashar al-Assad to this council, the departure of Bashar al-Assad, and the building of a new Syria. This is the Turkish position, and we really, I don't believe there is any change in this position.
Yeah. Well, the Syrian peace process, you gave us a clear picture of Assad as responsible for the Syrian quagmire. But at the same time, there is a process. What will be the role of Assad in this transition process? What's your clear idea on that? Will Assad take a place in any stage of this transition process?
I believe the only role he has is to hand over power and leave. There is no way that anyone can contemplate that a man who is responsible for the murder of 600,000 people and the displacement of 12 million has any role to play in Syria.
Yeah. In Aleppo, there is still bombing. What can Turkey and Saudi Arabia do in forcing Russia to have a ceasefire in Aleppo? This is one of the questions asked.
Yeah, we have been trying to weigh in with Russia and with the United States about the importance of having a ceasefire, the importance of allowing humanitarian assistance to go into all areas of Syria, and the importance of relaunching the negotiations in order to bring about a transition in Syria, and we continue to do so. There was an attempt at a cessation of hostilities after the passing of Resolution 2254 early this year. The opposition abided by it, the regime did not. It continued its bombing and it fell apart. And so we're hoping that the international community can continue to put pressure on the regime to move towards a ceasefire and then to move towards a political process that would be serious. And we will continue to push in that direction.
Well, we know the relations between Saudi Arabia and Iraq has some tensions. But what about Kurdish regional government? Relations between Kurdish regional government and Saudi Arabia, how do you see them?
We have good ties with the Kurds in Iraq, with Mr. Barzani. We have good ties with the Sunnis in Iraq. We have good ties with the Shia in Iraq. We have good ties with the Marja'iyya in Iraq. Iraq is an Arab country, and Iraq is a neighboring country. Iraq is an Islamic country. Iraq was the capital of the Abbasid Empire, Islamic Empire. It was a center of science and research and learning. Every Arab and every Muslim has a soft spot in his or her heart for Iraq. We want Iraq to flourish. We want Iraq to develop. But what has happened is Iraq has been hijacked by sectarianism and hijacked by Iran's interference in Iraq, which has complicated matters, which has torn the country apart and caused Iraqi to fight Iraqi based on ethnicity. That is clearly wrong. We have urged the Iraqi government to put an end to these policies and to be more inclusive and to bring the country together. We believe in the unity and territorial integrity of Iraq. We reject any talk or any attempt at dividing Iraq. We believe that Iraq is much bigger than the sum of its parts, and we believe that in the long run, God willing, the Iraqis will be able to put aside those who push sectarian policies and move in the direction of those who want to push nationalist policies.
Well, regarding Kurdish groups, how do you see PYD's presence? You know, Turkey is very critical of this entity as terrorist organization. And what is the Saudi perspective on that?
We support the Turkish position with regards to PYD, and we've made it very clear when there were attempts to bring them into the opposition or bring them into the coalition. Our view was that they are divisive and that they have a narrow-based agenda, and so we rejected giving them a role in the discussions with regards to Syria.
Well, another question is related to Syria. Actually, this issue of safe haven zone in northern Syria. How do you see that? Turkey is discussing so much on that. You know.
We have been calling for a safe haven in the north of Syria and in the south of Syria since the beginning of the conflict. We have been calling for a no-fly zone in the north and in the south since the beginning of the conflict, because we believe that when you have that, you can better protect the Syrian people, you minimize the number of refugees out of Syria, and you can then add to the pressures on the regime.
Yeah. Well, one specific question. Could you please expand on what measures are required at the regional level to maximize counter-terrorism efforts and to promote tolerance, good governance, and sustainable development?
That's a big question. I think it's two parts. One part is what can we do about terrorism, and then the other part is what do we do about sustainable development. With regards to terrorism, I believe, like I said, the men, the money, and the mindset. We need to have, this is what we do, and what we need with our partners is better cooperation. We have very strong cooperation with Turkey, but I'm saying on a regional level, there has to be better cooperation, better exchange of information. There has to be mechanisms put in place regionally that deal with the financial system so that we have better financial controls, and we need to go after the mindset, reverse the messages that the extremists are putting out, and we have to be better at using social media, because what happened until recently is Daesh puts out a promotional video that looks like it was produced in Hollywood, and governments respond with a press release that nobody reads. We're looking at social media. How do we come up with effective counter messages? And just as importantly, how do we distribute those messages? We have put together the Islamic Military Alliance that I mentioned earlier, that includes 40 countries. This alliance or coalition has two tracks. One is a military security track, where countries help each other with training and equipment and logistics and military force. And it has an ideological, financial track where the countries of this coalition will work together to share expertise and knowledge with regard to counter-messaging. What is the best message we can come up with? How do we distribute that message? Some countries in the Islamic world are very, very sophisticated and have tremendous capabilities. Other countries have modest capabilities. How do we transfer that knowledge and those capabilities to those that don't have it, so we can all be effective at pushing back against the terrorists? So this is what we're doing. In terms of good governance and transparency and so forth, in Saudi Arabia we have, as I mentioned, Vision 2030. We also have a 5-year national transformation program. It's actually 4 years, that we hope to conclude by 2020. And this program calls for setting goals for all of the ministries, having key performance indicators so we can track how they're doing and how they're performing, transparency, good governance, so that we provide better services, more efficient services to our citizens in a very transparent manner. That's how you open the door for more investment, domestic and foreign, and that's how you open the door for more innovation and more production and as a consequence, more prosperity and more stability.
Your Excellency, do you think this public and cultural relations diplomacy can be something useful for prevention of this extremism, violence in the region?
The public diplomacy?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The extremists use social media. The extremists use platforms in order to communicate to people in a public way. And we have, as societies, to be able to respond and go on the offense in a public manner. If we do it quietly, nobody will hear it, nobody will see it. We have to make it very clear to people that the messages that are coming out of the extremists are wrong. They have nothing to do with our Islamic faith. They have nothing to do with any faith. They have nothing to do with humanity. That this is evil, this is hatred, this is criminal, and that it must be rejected. And then we must show our people a better future so that we don't allow the extremists to hijack the minds of our young.
Yeah. Regarding Yemen, we see that there is no solution yet.
Inshallah, there will be.
What is the future solution? What is the future plan of Saudi Arabia in Yemen?
It is really not Saudi Arabia's plan, it is the plan of the international community. The United Nations passed Resolution 2216 that calls for a withdrawal from the areas occupied by the Houthi Saleh, that calls for the handing over of the heavy and medium weapons that is in their possession, that calls for the resumption of the national dialogue among Yemenis, that calls for establishing an interim government, a new constitution, new elections, and a permanent government. So the position of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is that of the international community. And we are working with the UN Special Envoy to try to persuade the Yemeni parties to move in that direction. And we are cautiously optimistic that we will be able to do that.
Well, we have economy questions, for Minister, but what is your forecast for oil prices in future period? That's the question. $1 million question.
Yes, I think if anyone can predict that, I think my hat off to them. The price of oil is determined, I believe, fundamentally by supply and demand. If you have supply and demand in balance, you have stable price. If demand exceeds supply, prices go up. And if supply exceeds demand, prices go down. That's basic economic theory. The oil-producing countries can affect it a little bit on the margins by reaching understandings with regards to freeze on production, or by maybe reducing production. But fundamentally, it's really driven by supply and demand. When the price of oil exceeded $100 a barrel, you saw tremendous shale oil production coming out of the United States. U.S. oil production increased by, I believe, 4 or 5 million barrels a day over a short number of years, because it was economically feasible to produce oil at that price. So this generated excess supply, which then led to a drop in prices. And what we see in the drop in prices is we see high-cost producers cutting back on their production because they don't make economic sense, shale, deep-sea drilling, and so forth. And then this, in turn, has reduced the supply. Economic growth has increased the demand, and now the markets are more in balance, and that's why we see prices where they are today. Do we expect them to go up? Inshallah. But as long as the world economy grows, demand will pick up and prices will gradually increase. And as prices increase, so will production, and so the balance will always be restored. Our objective as Saudi Arabia has been to try to balance the markets in a way that does not hurt producers and does not hurt consumers, and that in the long run is beneficial to both sides. High oil prices hurt consumers because they slow down economic growth, and ultimately hurt producers because then demand goes down. Low oil prices hurt producers in the short term because income drops, but they hurt consumers in the long term because it sets the stage for more wasteful consumption of energy, which then causes demand to go up and prices to go up. So we try to find a way to balance it without being what is called the swing producer.
Your Excellency, after your answer, I am sure that you can serve as Economy Minister as well. Well, OIC, one question is, can this institution be a military one in the future?
The OIC was established after the attack against the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the late 60s, where the Islamic countries came together at a conference and said, enough, we're not going to allow this to happen. And then it was found to be a useful forum for the Muslim world and Islamic countries to come together to discuss issues. It has grown into an international organization. Now it's the Organization of Islamic Countries, and it has a number of fields in which it works: conflict resolution, economic development. It works with the Islamic Development Bank to provide soft loans to projects in the Muslim world. It has educational components, information components. So it's really more like almost a United Nations, but focused on the Islamic world. It is a highly respected organization in terms of what it does, and it is now moving towards trying to be more effective in bringing together the Islamic in terms of functional and practical matters that help with development, that help with investment, that help with trade, that help with conflict resolution. With regards to the military part of it, I don't know if this is I don't know that this is an issue that has been looked at seriously. We now have the Islamic Military Alliance Against Terrorism. They're working on counterterrorism, they're working on, so I don't know. I mean, it is always good to try to have a security and military component for the Islamic world, but I'm not sure, and I'm just thinking out loud, I'm not sure if the OIC is the place to put it. I'm not sure if it would expand its mandate to where, instead of having a deep organization, we have a broad organization that may not be able to reach the depth that we want for it to deal with the challenges of the Islamic world.
Well, until now we have covered all the questions actually, but I want to ask a personal question. How do you see personally the future of the possibility of finding solutions to regional problems among regional powers themselves?
I think that's the only way to resolve conflicts. You resolve your conflict with your adversary, not with your friend. And you resolve conflicts, or you deal with challenges in the best way by dealing with partners who face the same challenges. And you increase your effectiveness by having more than one person deal with an issue. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, has said, my people will not agree on a mistake. When you have consultation and you have more than one person or more than one country looking at a challenge, you are more likely to arrive at the proper solution. So this has been the approach that we welcome. Some of the challenges are going to be difficult when you have a side that is determined to disturb the order in the region, such as Iran. How can you deal with a country that is committed to exporting its revolution, that in the process of doing so supports terrorism and all the things I mentioned? Can we persuade Iran to change its behavior? I think the Islamic world has taken steps in that direction. Iran is isolated in the Muslim world. We see Iran's relations with almost all Islamic countries suffering tremendously. We saw at the OIC summit that was held in Turkey recently that adopted resolutions that made it very, very clear to Iran that sectarianism is unacceptable, support for terrorism is unacceptable, the interference in the affairs of other countries is not acceptable. And so every country voted for it, except Iran, and maybe one or two countries abstained. But the vast majority of Islamic countries are saying to Iran, you have to change. And we hope that Iran will be able to hear this. The other challenges, such as Syria, we are working with our partners in the Gulf and in Turkey to try to bring about a change. The same in Iraq. In Yemen, for instance, we are working regionally and with the United Nations to try to move the country towards peace. On Libya, there are consultations among countries in the region, as well as with European countries and the United Nations to see what can be done. So our approach is, you need to have dialogue and cooperation and consultation with countries in the region if we want to deal with the challenges of the region.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for sharing your ideas, opinions with me.
You're very welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's join us for thanking Your Excellency.